Alright, picking up from where I left off. That night, Philomemnon stood beside me, and the dead drew near and lined the walls and cried out, "We want to know about God. Where is God? Is God dead?" But Philomemnon rose and said, and this is the second sermon to the dead: God is not dead. He is alive as ever. God is creation, for he is something definite, and therefore differentiated from the pleroma. God is a quality of the pleroma, and everything I have said about creation also applies to him. But he is distinct from creation in that he is much more indefinite and indeterminable. He is less differentiated than creation, since the ground of his essence is effective fullness. Only insofar as he is definite and differentiated is he creation, and as such he is the manifestation of the effective fullness of the pleroma, and is called out by its opposite. If, therefore, we do not differentiate God, effective fullness is cancelled out for us. Moreover, God is the pleroma itself, just as each smallest point in the created and uncreated is the pleroma itself. Effective emptiness is the essence of the devil. God and devil are the first manifestations of nothingness, which we call the pleroma. It makes no difference whether the pleroma exists or not, since it cancels itself out completely. Not so creation. Insofar as God and the devil are created beings, they do not cancel each other out, but stand one against the other as effective opposites. We need no proof of their existence. It is enough that we have to keep speaking about them. Even if both were not, creation would forever distinguish them anew out of the pleroma on account of their distinct essences. Everything that differentiates takes out of the pleroma. Everything that differentiation takes out of the pleroma is a pair of opposites. Therefore, the devil always belongs to God. This inseparability is most intimate and, as you know from experience, as indissoluble in your life as the pleroma itself, since both stand very close to the pleroma, in which all opposites are cancelled out and united. Fullness and emptiness, generation and destruction, are what distinguish God and the devil. Effectiveness is common for both. Effectiveness joins them. Effectiveness therefore stands above both, and is a God above God. Since it unites a fullness and emptiness through its effectuality, this is a God you knew nothing about, because mankind forgot him. We call him by his name, Abraxas. He is even more indefinite than God and the devil. To distinguish him from God, we call God Helios, or sun. Abraxas is effect. Nothing stands opposed to him but the ineffective. Hence, his effective nature unfolds itself freely. The unreal neither exists nor resists. Abraxas stands above the sun and above the devil. He is a improbable probability, that which takes unreal effect. If the pleroma had an essence, Abraxas would be its manifestation. He is the effectual itself, not any particular effect, but effect in general. He takes unreal effect because he has no definite effect. He is also creation, since he is distinct from the pleroma. The sun has a definite effect, and so does the devil. Therefore, they appear to us more effective than indefinite, than the indefinite Abraxas. He is force, duration, change. The dead now raised a great tumult, for they were Christians. But when Philomemnon had ended his speech, one after another the dead also stepped back into the darkness once more, and the noise of their outrage gradually died away in the distance. When all the clamor had passed, I turned to Philomemnon and exclaimed, "Pity us, wisest one! You take from men the gods to whom they could pray. You take alms from the beggar, bread from the hungry, fire from the freezing. Philemon answered and said, My son, these dead have had to reject the belief of the Christians, and therefore they can pray to no God. So should I teach them a God in whom they can believe and to whom they can pray? That is precisely what they have rejected. Why did they reject it? They had to reject it because they could not do otherwise. And why did they have no other choice? Because the world, without these men knowing it, entered into that month of the great year where one should believe only what one knows. That is difficult enough, but it is also a remedy for the long sickness that arose from the fact that one believed what one did not know. I teach them the God whom both I and they know of without being aware of him, a God in whom one does not believe, to whom one does not pray, but of whom one knows. I teach this God to the dead, since they desired entry and teaching, but I do not teach him to living men, since they did not desire my teaching. Why indeed should I teach them? Therefore I take away from them no kindly hearer of prayers, their Father in heaven. What concern is my foolishness to the living? The dead need salvation, since they are a great waiting flock hovering over their graves, and long for the knowledge that belief and the rejection of belief have breathed their last. But whoever has fallen ill is near death and wants knowledge, and he sacrifices pardon. It appears, I replied, as if you teach a terrible and dreadful God beyond measure, to whom God, good and evil and human suffering and joy are nothing. My son, said Philemon, did you not see that these dead had a God of love and rejected him? Should I teach them a loving God? They had to reject him after already having long since rejected the evil God whom they called the devil. Therefore they must know a God to whom everything created is nothing, because he himself is the creator, and everything created and the destruction of everything created. Have they not rejected a God who is a father, a lover, a good and beautiful, one whom they thought to have particular qualities and a particular being? Therefore I must teach a God to whom nothing can be attributed, who has all qualities and therefore none, because only I and they can know such a God. But how, O my Father, can men unite in such a God? Does the knowledge of such a God not amount to destroying human bonds and every society based on the good and the beautiful? Philemon answered, these dead rejected the God of love, of the good and the beautiful. They had to reject him, so they rejected unity and community and love in the good and the beautiful, and thus they killed one another and dissolved the community of men. Should I teach them the God who united them in love and whom they rejected? Therefore I teach them the God who dissolves unity, who blasts everything human, who powerfully creates and mightily destroys. Those whom love does not unite, fear compels. And as Philemon spoke these words, he bent down swiftly to the ground, touched it with his hand, and disappeared. Alright. Quick pause there. So that's the second sermon to the dead. And again, the bugs are still swarming me here. Again, they're not biting me, but it's bothersome. And so, what I find interesting about this is basically I had already kind of come to this conclusion of what I consider Abraxas more like the Tao, in my opinion. I feel like they're kind of similar. I feel like the framing of the Tao is a lot more passive. It's a lot less, realistically it encompasses destruction and all of these things. But I guess the Tao is, well, I don't know. The Tao is really more like the Pleroma, but this concept of effect, this is basically just entropy, right? The idea of just cause and effect and how things play out and all of that. is it's really like an alien concept to really see this as a god. But society nowadays is one that worships science, basically, right? And so this is kind of a merging of science and religion in back into something that can be unified, right? Because right now they're seen as separate things, but this quote unquote abraxas could, you know, rejoin these two into a single belief once again, which sounds weird. But I think that it's the logical path forward for us because, you know, everyone having this kind of separate method for beliefs is kind of, you know, empty, right? People that say they don't believe in anything, you know, it's pretty bleak. And so I think this is like a tool to help people um, understand, or at least that's what he's pretty much saying. And so I think that that is, um, you know, valuable. I think it's interesting, but I also think it's funny that like, you know, Philmondum's saying these sermons, right? And then the crowd of people are just like storming off in like, in a commotion, all in, you know, all upset about this. They're like, this guy he's crazy. What is he talking about? This is ridiculous, right? And then they like storm off into the distance. But then the next night they come back, right? And so that's why. So the first sermon happened, and then they were all upset. Or really they weren't that upset, but they just kind of went quiet and like backed away. They're like, I don't know about this, right? And they backed away, right? And then the next day they're like, the sermon happens, and then they're like, oh my, what are you're killing our gods, right? You're saying this god's above our god. You're belittling our god. That's craziness. You can't do that, right? And so now there's this uproar from them, and they're very upset about this, but they're still going to come back the next night, right? So I find that interesting, and I think that it's a good relation to, again, people in the modern day, right? This concept is not going to be well accepted at the beginning, but over time, I think that this will come to be, you know, this is the book is called Liber Novus, you know, a new book. And I think that the intention with that is that, you know, it's a new book for, in theory, a new religion. And so I find it interesting. But yeah. All right. I'm going to continue in the next. I'm going to move again because the bugs are still biting me. So, peace out.